Welcome to episode 86 of the Forward with 50 podcast, where we interview people over 50 who are pursuing new direction for their lives. It's an opportunity for men and women to tell their stories, their way, and in their own words. I'm Greg Gerber, the founder of Forward with 50, and your host for today's show. Today I'm speaking with a woman from Texas who, while writing a book, embarked on a rather unusual journey back in time where she encountered her 10-year-old self on a 36-hour trip to her childhood home. While completely fictitious, the experience challenged her in ways she didn't anticipate. Amy Wineland Daughters had the idea to write the book for a long time, but it took a long time for her to develop the confidence she needed in her writing ability to even begin the project. In her book, You Cannot Mess This Up, Amy travels back to Thanksgiving 1978, where she finds herself in her home with her parents and siblings, as well as the 10-year-old version of herself. In fact, everyone thinks Amy is a cousin from Ohio. In real life, Amy has been fascinated with the idea of time travel for many years. For an inexperienced writer, her book won an award for time travel fiction. Amy's career was in purchasing while she and her husband raised their children in the United States and in the United Kingdom. While in Europe, Amy started dabbling in writing, but it was after turning 50 that she really pursued her dream. While becoming an author was certainly a new direction for Amy's life, her life really changed profoundly after she read that a contact on LinkedIn had a son who was battling cancer. That prompted Amy to start sending handwritten, personalized letters of encouragement to families staying at the Ronald McDonald House and later to all 580 of her Facebook friends. To tell us more about her new purpose in writing both books and handwritten notes to hundreds of people, please welcome Amy Wineland Daughters to the show. Thanks for joining me today, Amy. I appreciate your time. I understand that you have developed a kind of unique novel that combines your own life experiences. Tell us about it.
I'd had the crazy idea as a writer to write this book forever, but it just took me forever to be confident enough, because I don't have a degree in writing. I have a business degree, to actually sit down and write it. But it's basically, I send myself back in time to my childhood in 1978 when I'm 10 years old. I kind of time travel myself backwards, and then I spend Thanksgiving of 1978 for about 36 hours in my childhood home. And my parents and myself and my siblings, the 1978 versions of us, think I'm a cousin from Ohio. So they know they're related to me. So I get this window where I spend Thanksgiving with these people who don't know who I am, who are my nuclear family. And so I get to look at my life as an adult and realize that I messed up all the memories, and as a 10-year-old, I couldn't have gotten it right. So basically, the way I like to talk about it, there's a lot of truth in the book. So it's a memoir that's wrapped up in the tortilla of fiction of time travel.
Okay. So you took a little nugget of your own life and then wrote a story around it.
So it's fiction and nonfiction converge in the book. So
there's a young lady pictured on the cover. Is that you as a girl?
No, that's the book
Okay.
people did that. And since it's sold as women's fiction or mainstream fiction because of the time travel. The book won an award for time travel fiction, which we all thought was hilarious because we didn't know who won the time travel nonfiction department, the real time travel people. But I wanted to meet those people because I felt I wanted to hear their story, but I don't think there was a category for that.
That's neat to incorporate time travel back into your book. I wonder, a lot of people probably could do that, is to go back in there and finish out the story, or wonder what would happen if their lives had gone in a different direction had they taken a different choice.
And I didn't, as a first time author, I didn't understand how relatable that story was going to be. I just always wanted to write it because I've always been fascinated. I've probably read everything that has anything to do with time travel. I've watched every time travel movie. And so I wanted to write a time travel book. But my whole intention was to write a time travel book that was humorous, which I did. But I had no idea how relatable it was going to be to readers, because you immediately put yourself in my shoes, really, no matter who you are. I was surprised that I have two sons, and the older one he thought it was completely relatable. One, he liked seeing my childhood, but two, he said he thought about going back to his own childhood. And I think any age group, no matter if you grew up in the 60s and 70s, we did, or you grew up in the 80s and 90s, it's super relatable because you immediately think, what would it look like if I was Big Amy and Little Amy?
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah, there is a Disney movie, The Kid, that kind of
Oh, great
incorporates that.
movie.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. It makes
right.
me wonder, what would I tell my 8-year-old self if I were to encounter that?
And I answered those questions through just the time I spent. You submerge yourself back in time is what I did. I had younger children at the time that I wrote the meat of the book, and it was very indulgent to go away for the weekend by myself. And so I did that probably 3 or 4 times because my husband is a rock star and thought that was a good idea. Even though when you write a book, there's absolutely no promise of any future success. But I went to the 70s resort in quotation marks, this like a state park in Ohio, but it was a 70s place with the wood paneled ceilings so I spent these weekends there and I had VCR tapes of grown. I submerged myself back in time and it allowed me the family photo albums, all those things. It allowed me to really, really think out what I would say to my 8-year-old, in this case, 10-year-old self.
Mhm.
And it's funny though, because people who after the fact have said that you really wrote a catharsis and that was in no way my intention. They're like, oh, was your therapist recommending that you do? I was like, no, I thought I was going to be hilarious and go back into Sears catalog. That was all I wanted to do.
Exactly. Who doesn't remember the Sears catalog, especially this time of year, which around Christmas, we just circled everything on it that we wanted Santa to bring, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Super. So what prompted you to start this book?
This was the book idea I'd had for years. And like I said, I was not formally trained to write. I started writing later I was in purchasing forever. And later in that, not later, midway, 3/4 through, my husband's job offered him the opportunity to move to the UK for 3 years. And we both said this is a great opportunity for us and our kids. We can see Europe and it really have opportunities we would not have that we could afford ourselves. And so we said we're going to do it. And that meant that I was going to pause my career. And we had both worked. And so we get over there and I don't have a work visa. The kids go to school in the village and he goes to work. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And we'd always both been busy and we'd gotten to points in our career that we both done pretty well. The first thing I did is I took classes in history at the local university, which was fascinating. But then I'd always written, even in high school, I'd written short stories on the side. And I'd always dabbled in writing. When you're busy, you have 3 daughters. When you're busy doing life, you don't go back and you don't write short stories in the evening. You just try to go to bed.
Exactly.
So I didn't exercise it, but I was the girl at work who would write an email about the company picnic and like work on it, be like, oh my God, this is hilarious. Or, reread my stuff I was writing. I was like, oh, that's so good. That paragraph's so good. And I never saw that in myself until this time that I was in the UK. So after taking the classes, 3 years is a long time. I was desperate and I was like, I'll dabble back in. Maybe I'll write some short stories and because I had all the time in the world. And so I started writing and the internet, we were still on dial-up internet, but it was freeing up that opportunity for a space like that. Mm-hmm. And so I started writing like letters from America, letters from England, from a small town Texas girl. And so I sold those. And then I started thinking I could make it go at this while I'm over here. And so by the time we got home from England back to Texas, I had created a little niche. We had another kid, so I had to stay home further. And then by the time that was over, I had created a part-time job that turned into a full-time job. So that entire time, I think everyone has a book idea at some time. I had this idea of the time travel novel. And as I gained traction writing, I got the confidence it took to take myself seriously. And so then I sat down and started writing it, but it took me probably 4 years to write the actual book. But my intention again was just to write a funny back in time book. That's what I wanted to do because I love history. I love time travel. I love anything. If you ask me whether I wanted to go back or go forward, I'd 100% go back. Mm-hmm. And so I set out on the journey to write this. And really the journey to write it was even better than what happened next.
Mm-hmm. And what happened next?
The book it took me, again, anybody who's written the first book knows that you basically have to beg. And I went through that whole process, probably 1.5 years, 2 years until finally someone decided to publish it. And that was surreal and unreal the whole time. And then it became a book. And now I get to talk about it. And it's fascinating. And then there was the process of going through the publishing because it's a super personal story. And that sounds very obvious that you're going to publish what's basically a memoir. And so then once those words get into print, you can't go back from that. And that sounds obvious too, but those were all profound experiences for me as a writer. But yeah, I'm super proud of the impact the book's had. And then most of all, that the book's funny.
What was it like for you to go back in time to communicate with your 10-year-old self?
I will say, and again, this wasn't my intention, Greg. I was a different person going into writing this book than I came out on the other side. And there were so many takeaways for me personally, just as a individual and as a mom, because I go back and basically watch what my parents are doing and commenting on it. And one of the takeaways at the very end of the book is, oh my God, I hope my kids never write a back in time travel novel because I don't think I can handle it. Because I, like all parents, we tried our best. But the truth is, we tried our best, the best we could, but everyone turned out the way they were going to turn out anyway. And along the way, there's quite a few bumps in parenting, just like there were for my parents. But it did give me, especially with my mother, it gave me a new perspective because I went back and watched her try to keep the whole thing together in the 70s. And so she didn't even have I won't say the standing in the community, but a woman's role was different in 1978 than my experience as a mother and a wife. But my father's passed away, but I had a fabulous father who I really admired. But the truth is, this was 1978. And I observed just from going back in time, I would think about her making Thanksgiving dinner and how she had no help. And dad didn't come in and help do the dishes at the end, which is what happened now. My husband is very helpful because his mother enforced that on him. But that's the way now. You look like you're a jerk if you don't help up at the end now. It's just a different world now. But I really admired her because I came down the day after Thanksgiving in my parents' house in the book, and I realized everything had been picked up. All the cigarettes had been cleaned, all the laundry was put away somewhere. And I realized this woman was just a hero and no one ever said anything. They just expected it. And then she didn't have the opportunities I had. She had moved to England. She wouldn't have been writing. She would have been doing the same stuff she did in America without the internet. And my mom and I had a difficult relationship. And I think it really transformed our relationship because I looked at her as a totally different person because of this thought up, dreamed up, conjured up trip back in time.
That's neat. When you selected the stories or the things to talk about in the book, what criteria did you go through to pick the things from your past that you wanted to incorporate into this novel?
A lot of it was back to humor, Greg. That wasn't the only thing. The story kind of flowed once I started writing it. As I got myself back to their house, it flowed naturally. What happened, because I just drew in memories and then started plugging them in where it seemed like it made sense. And some of them didn't fit in the timeline of Thanksgiving, but they made it because I found them they cracked me up basically. And I found them to be humorous. And it turned out that they were heartwarming to people I didn't know, which again surprised me because they felt like they had gone back in time as well.
What about your friends? Did you incorporate them into your book as from back when you were growing up?
The only friends I really included was I got to a crisis point that night of Thanksgiving. My parents had a party. I went upstairs and I wanted to call somebody and talk to them. I didn't have a cell phone. I didn't have the internet. I didn't have any of those things. I couldn't text. So I wanted to go out to the landing and get on the phone and call my childhood friend who was 10 at the time as well. But I realized if I call her at 11:30 at night, her parents are going to answer. And I'm like 47 in the book. That was going to, a 47-year-old stranger. So that wasn't going to go over well. So I had to, sans all technology, go back in my room and deal with it myself.
What did you do for a career before you took up writing?
I was in purchasing. I was a buyer at a adult beverage distributor, like a wine company.
Okay.
So
do you still do that?
No, I'm 100% a writer and a speaker, and totally not what I expected. And again, in theme with your show, a lot of this has happened later in my life. The speaking didn't happen until probably 55. The books were both after 50. It's a credit to what can happen. And really my trajectory is still up, which is incredible.
So You Cannot Mess This Up was your first book. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Have you done others since then?
I have a second book, which is a nonfiction book.
What is that about?
That is a journey I went on that I did not expect to go on. And the basic story is I was minding my own business on Facebook one day, and I friended a girl who I'd worked with at a summer camp in 1986, who had a big personality like me, and I hadn't spoken to her in 35 years or written her or had any kind of contact with her. But I friended her, it didn't mean anything, so she friended me back. I looked at her online and she had overachieved in kids. She had 5 kids, 4 girls and a boy. And the youngest was the boy. His name was Parker. And right away, I found out he had cancer. He was at St. Jude in Memphis. And, as a human being, I connected to the story. She was asking for prayer online. I like to pray.
Okay.
And so I started praying. It's like silently in the background. I didn't like any of her posts. I didn't comment on them. I mean, I really didn't know her. And then I followed her story. I like football. She likes football. She's an LSU fan. That was a new thing to me. And so I got engaged and I continued to pray. And then Parker went into remission, went home. I still followed along with her story, but it went on the back burner. Like I didn't pray actively. And so then he relapses like at the end of 2000. And I'm sitting at my desk one morning. I was writing about college football for the Bleacher Report at the time. And I had this schedule Monday for Tuesday for Wednesday, like 4 articles a week. And it was like a lightning bolt hit me. And I hadn't written anyone a letter in 25 years, like the rest of us. And I was like, I'm going to start sending them supportive cards at the Ronald McDonald House every week, and I'm going to handwrite them. And I was not trying to do anything. I was not trying to go on some meaningful journal. I just felt connected through the prayer to these people. And I just felt like I should do something. And so I start writing these cards to these people I've never met this kid. This woman probably doesn't even know who I am because my last name is Daughters now. And that's, everybody always thinks, she's talking about her daughters. It's very confusing. And so I start writing them once a week. And I just start with, I'm praying for you. I'm thinking about you. I know you're fighting. We're all fighting with you. The regular stuff you would say. As the weeks go on, I start adding a little more about my life because you have to say something. And then about 10 weeks in, I could tell that it wasn't going great. And then she wasn't even posting on Facebook. It was her friends. And then in January of 2000, Parker passes away, and he's only 15 years old, and it's completely devastating. And I knew it had nothing to do with me, Greg, but I felt called to the whole card writing, and so I was like, "What do I do?" And really, the story goes in stages of me acting irrationally. So I write a condolence card, and I send it to the Ronald McDonald House, and then it was like another mini lightning bolt. I call that God, but people are free to say whatever they think that is. That's what it was for me. And so I was like, I'm just going to keep writing the letters. Only now I don't have an address. So I know her husband, who I'd met at camp too, is a lawyer. So I was like, I'll just keep sending the cards to the law office address. That's crazy. But I do. And so for about 4 months, and every week I'm telling myself, what are you doing? I keep writing her because I just feel like I need to do some kind of support. So I keep writing her, and the letters get longer. I start writing about my life. And then I don't know, it was my birthday. We were living in Ohio at the time. I go out to the mailbox, and here's this handwritten letter from Dana, this 10-page handwritten letter.
Aww.
And that kicks off literally 2 years. All we did was write each other every week. We don't text.
In the tech era. I love it.
And the experience was so profound because when you write somebody in the mail and you don't know if they received it or read it, and you don't know when anyone's reading or writing, it creates this free space where you can share. And plus the fact that you're writing without someone in front of you, you're not even thinking about it and receiving it. So it turns into Dear Diary a little bit. But we developed this trust. We would tell each other, I've never told anybody this, but I can tell you, literally have not spoken, have not texted, have not emailed, but we trusted each other. And it was beautiful because I didn't know how she voted. I knew she believed in God, but I didn't really know what specific religion she had. I didn't know what her take on gender issues was. I didn't know any of those things, none of it. I just knew that I cared about her and she cared about me because we were writing these letters. And she really opened up about her grief because she told me after the fact that she would go into the room of the other the 4 daughters and the husband, and if everyone seemed like they were having an okay day, then she didn't want to bring the room down, so she would go write me. And then I didn't feel like I had to comment on the grief because I didn't know what to say about it because it was extreme. And so I would just continue with the whole, we're praying for you. And and because I didn't know what to say. But with the letters, I didn't feel bad about immediately addressing like I would with the text. This goes on, and I get about 6 to 8 months into pen paling with her, and it's affected me so profoundly that I can have this intimate relationship with this woman who I don't really know, who now I really do know. I started thinking, what else is out there on this Facebook friends list? If I can ever uncover this that changes
Mm-hmm.
my life. So I'm like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take all the names of all these people, and there was like 500 at the time, and I'm going to put them in a box. I'm going to get some stationery. I'm going to get a journal, and I'm going to make up some rules, and I'm going to write all these people a handwritten letter.
Wow. From
And
your
so,
Facebook friends list.
yeah, and so
Okay.
I never thought I was really going to finish. I got 10 letters in, and I was like, oh my God, what have I done? Like, I should just exit right now and be like, I'm gone. But I decided I was going to continue because once I got over about 50 letters, I started to see, I was like, this is going to change my life. It's going to be a lot of work, and I'm not going to want to do it, which is exactly, if you look at my journal, every 2 days, I'm like, oh my God, I can't write another letter. I can't go on. Because I'm just, and again, I wasn't trying to go on some meaningful journey. This was all destiny, God, whatever you want to call it. But in 18 months, I wrote 580 handwritten letters, and it absolutely blew up my life. And I realized I was going to write a book about it. I ended up speaking about it because it absolutely it is absolutely changed my life. And I realized that the power of a handwritten letter, that for 73 cents and about 15 minutes of our time, we can absolutely change someone's heart. And especially in this day and age and this divisiveness, that kind of intentional, deliberate act that makes someone feel like an individual and seen is
Mm-hmm.
so powerful. And 580 times, boom, I experienced this. So now, Greg, I can't shut up about it.
I love it. How did you get the addresses if it were on Facebook?
That's a great question. I'm a numbers girl. So I had 40% of the addresses. When I say I had it, like my mother had it, or my sister had it, or I could email a friend of a friend and say, hey, do you have it? But the other 60%, the first thing I did was if I knew you had a workplace, that was easy, like teachers, easy. Send it to the school. And it's so non intrusive, too, letter writing. You're not asking for anything back. And it's not, I don't think it made anyone feel uncomfortable because you don't have to do anything with a letter. And I didn't even know if you got it or not, especially when the volume got to the point it did. So I would do that. And stalking, I would look on the internet and figure out where you were. And then if I couldn't find you, the last case scenario was I would Facebook message you. And at the beginning, that was very awkward. But once people knew what was going on, it was super easy because people were waiting at the end for their letter. And this was a random draw. It's the other reason I finished because I knew the people in the last 150 letters, it wasn't their fault that I didn't draw their name earlier. I had to. And the other thing was I knew when I mailed the last letter, my youngest son, told me that day, he went with me to mail the last letter and we took a picture. He was very annoyed. And he said, Mom, this is probably the most important thing you'll ever do in your life.
Oh,
So, yeah.
that's sweet.
Hmm.
Absolutely. This just tells me that anybody can have this kind of purpose and bring this kind of joy into other
Oh, yeah.
people's lives. And like you said, it only cost less than $1 for a
Yeah.
card and a stamp.
And you don't, and I think the problem with my story, Greg, is that it's overwhelming. One, I'm a writer, and you don't have to be a writer.
Mm-hmm.
And two, you don't have to write 600 letters. I know that's ridiculous. Again, I think God gave me this story as a launch pad to have this discussion. That's what it is. But you can write 4 sentences in a card and have the same impact because people are going to go to the mailbox, and you and I and everyone listening knows we go to the mailbox now, and very rarely would there be something specifically for you, much less a handwritten note. So you're going to open the mailbox. Let's say you sent me a letter, Greg, and let's say
Mm-hmm.
we went to college together or high school together. I'm going to open the mailbox and I'm going to pull that out. And regardless of what you said, and if you say something meaningful, it makes it even better. But regardless of what you said, I'm going to hold this letter from Greg in my hand and I'm going to immediately connect the dots. And I know this because I saw it over and over again. And you're going to think, oh my God, she had to sit down. You had to sit down. You had to find a card. You had to get a pen. You had to, one person told me when they wrote me back, they had to use Aspercream ever oft afterwards. And I thought that was hilarious because no one writes a letter and who says Aspercream to anyone in their lives? But you're going to have to write it. You have to take the effort to do that. Then you got to put it in there. You got to seal it. You got to find a stamp. Where's my address? Then you got to drive yourself. some to wherever the blue boxes are, because there's not as many of them as there used to
Hmm.
be, or the post office, and you got to mail it. So immediately I'm going to hold that in my hand. I'm going to think, this is how much I matter to another human being in this divisive culture
Hmm.
of of social media where we feel isolated, and it is going to blow people up because people the number one takeaway from those 580 letters was this: I am going to save your letter in a special place for the rest of my life.
I've heard that from a number of people, and you're absolutely right. My memory box behind me is full with the letters that I've received from people over the years. And
Right,
it is neat, especially today when you get nothing but junk mail in the mail. So
right.
there's a big difference then between getting an actual physical letter than doing a Facebook message or an email, right?
And I had no idea. Again, I wasn't setting off on it. It's like both books are the same exact approach on my part, not meaning to do something meaningful.
Hmm.
And I think that really probably made it more meaningful on both cases. It was so organic and it just happened on its own. And I just went along for the ride, basically. But over and over again, it changed people over and over again, especially when I stepped over the line of if I had a recipient who I knew did not believe the same things I did politically or from a religious standpoint. That was an even more powerful letter because you're going all out across that divide that we've created, and you're grasping hands with somebody and telling them really that the connection, while all those things are still important,
Hmm.
what you believe, how you vote, those things are absolutely important, but the connection with a human being is more important. And that's when we've lost that space where we learn from each other.
That's I've said that for a while because one of the other businesses that I run is called Life Story School, which is teaching people how to tell stories and especially about their own life. And I'm convinced that stories are what connects us, and that if we were to
Right.
sit down and talk to each other and tell each other our stories, divisiveness in America would disappear overnight.
And that's fascinating because that's what happened with the letters. Because you think, what did I put in the letters? And what it became a natural formula. One, I would say, here's what I'm doing, Parker and Dana. This is why I'm doing it. And two, so then what am I going to say after that? First, I'm going to go look at your Facebook profile and try to connect in some way. And I'm going to see you as a real person. I'm going to say, oh, Greg, oh my gosh, look at all he's doing in all the good he's pushing out in the world. Look at his three daughters. Look at the life he's made for himself. And then the first thing I'm going to see you as a real human being. I'm
Hmm.
going to see that, and I saw immediately people had struggles I knew nothing about. They had accomplishments that I hadn't seen because it's a news feed. You only get what they give you on the algorithm.
Hmm.
And so here's this marvelous, fabulous, real person with the same kind of messed up, beautiful life that I have. And so I would immediately get to say things like, I'm sorry this happened to you, Greg, or congratulations, or look, I'm proud that I was your friend in high school and look at all the good you're doing. And then the second part of that is what you said, like from a different angle. Because the second part you would do with a person every time, because you still got another page, Greg, what are you going to say? And I would immediately think, oh, Greg, how does he fit into my story? Like what was our interaction like? So I already look at you as a real person and this person who I really admire now, because that's what I would do if I looked back on you if we were a college or high school friend. I'd be like, oh my gosh, I admire what you've done. And you're a real human being with a real story. And then I look at I'm like, oh, what was Greg like? Oh, yeah, we ate lunch every day together. And I struggled through high school, and that really meant something to me. Or my grandmother died, and you came over and were like, I am so sorry. And you like made sure and sat next to me at lunch by the payphone every day after that. And then I get this incredible opportunity to say, hey, Greg, thanks for being there for when you made a difference in high school. Now that I have kids, I realize how much that means. And so I never thanked you for that. And so I got a chance to say thank you to 580 people, and it blew up. So for me, I was the one who came away the most changed from the whole thing. My gratitude meter just went berserk. But for the other person to feel appreciated like that, you think the gift you've given them, again, I was the most changed, but you're just giving people a gift and it's easy.
Hmm. Absolutely.
It's not even difficult.
I know that we have more in common with each other than we'd like to envision. And to go through somebody's Facebook profile, that's the easiest way to find that because that's what they're posting about all the time. The things that they like to do as a general rule. Even if they're involved in politics all the time, the things
Right.
that they're doing, there's something on their profile that connects them as a human being to you that you
Right.
can pick up on and talk about. I love that you took your grandson to the zoo. They might have 1,000 political messages, but they have a photo of them with their grandson at the zoo. And that would be a way to really talk about it. And pretty soon, people are going to start posting more of that stuff and less of the crap, I think.
No, and that exactly thing. And then you get to say, I can't believe I get to see your grandson.
Yes.
After all these years we did life together when we were 18, through 22. And what a privilege to see your grandson. That's incredible. And then to say, I would always sign off your friend in real life because, it's like taking that electronic relationship and turning it into something real. And Greg, the responses were unbelievable. People opening up and people saying what it meant to them and people telling me about their lives. I walked away feeling guilty from some of it because there was no way I could keep up with all of it. But I always said I was going to get off Facebook. Now, those 580 people, they are my people because we connected in a way that was so individual. And my brother and sister are hilarious because, since my dad's passed away, we've had several things and people just show up and they're like, oh, it's the letter people. Here come the letter people because they feel like they're really connected to me in a way that we're not connected to other people. And what an absolute gift, because it went from this random list that we all have of people we know from different degrees, from different parts of our lives, to this actual treasure trove of human beings that I'm connected to that are absolute rock stars. And I'm not talking about rock stars and they're billionaires. It's the rock stars in life. And that's true whether they're a Democrat or a Republican or a Baptist or a Buddhist or whatever. It doesn't matter. It matters that they're connected to me. Those are my people. I got to be connected to them. They're my friends.
That's neat. So these Facebook friends that you started with, they were truly your friends, people that you had associated with in high school or in life at some point.
I did have a few people who, and one of the rules I created was you have to write them no matter what. You have to write everyone no matter what. And the only caveat was if I didn't have any like mutual friends, like say I got friended with somebody I didn't know, but I wrote people who were friends of friends who friended me because they knew, we knew the same person. But I wrote those people and said, isn't it great that we love the same person? We've got to have something in common. That letter might have been a little bit shorter, but I could write anyone by the end. I still write someone every day, but because it's just adrenaline and it honors the story and it reminds me every day that I can do something in the world that's positive. But yeah, I wrote all those people too. I wrote people I fired at my job, and that was scary but cathartic because I got the chance to say, as a human being, I'm just letting you know that's like a milestone in my life, that firing, and that was a business thing. And those people all wrote me back. I fired 3 people in my career, and those 3 people wrote back, and 2 of them told me they loved me.
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah. And you think about it, but it meant something to them that I reached out regardless of that, which is a real roadblock between 2 people.
I think that what you're talking about is what we're going to experience as Christians when we get to heaven. And we have these encounters where we learn how those interactions that we ignored years ago had a profound impact on other people. That we were there at the right time with the right word and all that kind of stuff.
And that's what, yeah. And I saw that with my own relationships. I was like, God just knocked that out of the park. And it gave me such hope because I looked back and you think about it. If you sit down and spent 45 minutes on each of these people, which was about what it took, I don't know, 30. I was quicker at the end, but they were handwritten, so it took longer. But I realized that these people had showed up at the right time for me as well. And they wrote me back and told me I'd showed up at the right time for them. But the hope for me and my children is that, and especially when I look at my kids and I look at my own life, I'm like, look at this trail of people who showed up, whether they were at a wedding and we danced and laughed in the women's room, for 45 minutes. Everyone showed up at the right time for me. And I was like, God has totally got this. If I didn't see it after that, and that's one of the great messages I get to talk about. And especially I wrote those letters during the first Trump-Clinton election. And so that was I think God was intentional about that because it was such a fresh thing to receive during that time when we first became really divisive. And I'm still in connection with those people who didn't vote the same way I voted and I still feel a strong affinity to those people, and I love them more than I'm divided by them.
As it should be.
Amen.
Exactly. We can still be friends and disagree on things.
Right.
We're crying out loud. What fun is it if we're just hanging around people who think like us all the time, right?
Amen. That's a powerful message, Greg.
Thank you. I appreciate that. You hand wrote all of the letters. If
Yes,
I
sir.
were to do that, it would look like some second grader who needs a penmanship class. Is the handwritten important, or is it just the message? Can somebody type out a message and put it in a card and send it? Or would it not have the same impact, do you think?
No, I think it would. I think the handwritten probably is next level because it shows your mistakes. I think we grew up with knowing our people's handwriting. We know our parents' handwriting. We know our grandparents' handwriting. If certain people mail us a letter, we know exactly who it's from
Mm-hmm.
without looking at the address. And I think they're special about that. But I do think you can have the same impact because people type me letters back for that reason and
Mm-hmm.
it meant just as much to me because they signed it and wrote a note at the bottom. And
Okay.
it's still a super intentional act. And I think people with arthritis and people with
Right.
it,
Mm-hmm.
and it's fair to say you got to handwrite it. If you're going to put it in the mail, I think that's really the next level that makes the difference because it's that same intentionality. It's that same you're that special to me, that handwriting the thing out because I'm a horrible speller, which is hilarious. So my handwriting's not great. I tried to slow it down. Dana, who I still write, and she still writes me back. She'll always be like, "Oh, your penmanship is starting to slide again." I'm like, "I know, I'm sorry," but I think you can have that same impact in putting it through the mail. And again, I think it can be 4 sentences. It doesn't have to be 2 pages to have that kind of impact. Because I think you just say what's in your heart. And though that is putting yourself out there, because I did it over and over again and felt, oh my gosh, it's vulnerable to do that.
I agree. And it costs nothing to start, really.
Mm-mm.
And you did it in how many letters per week were you sending out?
18 months, it was so I was at like one point, I have an infographic. I think I finished it just under a letter a day because I took the weekends
Okay.
off.
Okay.
But I had intended to do 2 letters a day in my plan, but there was no way. I mean, it was exhausting, and
Oh,
my finger was bleeding at the end where my pen rests. I mean, it was. Yeah, I took a picture of it. Yeah, it was exhausting, and I'm just a normal person. I was mentally and emotionally exhausted at the end. I celebrated the end, but I stopped taking friend requests probably 2 months before the end because I just knew there was only so far I could go with it.
so do you accept friend requests now?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay. You do.
Yeah,
They
and
might
and
it might take a
what's
while
that?
to get a letter, right?
But what I do have on my website, I have a mailing address, and anyone who writes me, I'll write you back because that's that just brings me great joy. And I would love to, if you want your first letter, to write it to me. I'll write you back. Write me 3 sentences, and I'll completely 100% write you back, guaranteed.
That's neat. It'd be fun if we could get kids to do this again and start the be pen pals with other children around the country or the world. I've heard of kids sending letters to soldiers that they don't even know, that type of thing. It has the same kind of impact. So yes, if we could get back to letter writing, we could solve a lot of problems.
No, I think we could. And like your
Hmm.
storytelling, it's a play on your approach. It really is, because that's what the letter does. It's a story in a way.
Exactly. And that's a great way to share your faith with people in a non threatening, non confrontational way because who can argue about your story, right? Yeah, go ahead.
My older son just had a major life event, and the way he shared it with everyone in our family is he wrote everyone a handwritten letter.
Oh,
And that was a testament to, and he said, Mom, I'm just going to take a page out of your book and write the letters. And it was very, the other thing that's very, and I realized it was all God, but still I get a lot of messages from people or letters or emails about their own letter writing experience. And that's completely edifying. And it's part of Dana and Parker's story. And Parker loved Jesus. And I think that's why I was called into the story. The
mm-hmm.
most ill-equipped woman. I don't know what to do if people are crying. I don't know what to do. I experience grief, but not on that level. But I think that's why I was brought in because Parker loved Jesus. And that's what the story is really about at the end of the day.
And that's a good thing when you're talking about grief is people don't often know what to say, so they don't say anything. And that's the exact wrong approach to take with that. People
Right.
want to talk about the loved one that they lost. And all
They
you have to
do.
do is ask. Tell me about
Right.
him. What was his favorite thing to do? And
Right.
that means so much more than you're in my prayers, right? Yeah,
And they want to keep that person alive in everyone's
exactly.
memory. And that's what I've learned from Dana. And you can never be too late in coming in and saying something. And I know the letters helped them via God. They waited on him every week to come.
Hmm.
And they were like, when's she going to stop? And it hasn't stopped. But that's again because of God. That's not because of me. Because I was just called into a situation, and that's what happened.
So
So
you said your second book is about this letter writing campaign of
yeah,
yours? And what's
mhm.
it titled?
It's called Dear Dana. That
Okay.
time I went crazy and wrote all 580 of my Facebook friends a handwritten letter.
Okay.
It's the longest subtitle in publishing.
Well,
But
it's
I can't believe it got through the book people. The book people are tough, So
exactly. Thank you very much for sharing this today. This is wonderful. It gives such inspiration to anybody should be able to start something like this if they want to truly have an impact on the lives of others. How can people connect with you if they'd like to touch base?
if you go to amydaughters.com, it's got my email address, my mailing address, both books, the whole story, some shenanigans, some entertainment. And again, I'd love to, if anyone reaches out to me, I'd love to, it has questions about letter writing, has questions about the first book, which is hilarious. I don't want to
Hmm.
forget about that. But and of course, I want to sell books, Greg. I'm like a small businesswoman.
Right.
But to me, it's more about spreading the story.
Exactly. I
That's
agree.
why I'm here.
And
So, and I appreciate
are you active on social media too?
I am. And there's links. I'm on Instagram and Facebook, and
Okay.
those links are on my page, my website. The icons are at the bottom, and you can just direct link to them. So,
Super. Thank you again for sharing these wonderful stories. I love the idea of going back into time to encounter your 10-year-old self. And how much fun would that be to be able to do that? It'd be
oh,
a great
absolutely.
project for somebody to do and incorporate it as part of their life story, right?
Stories again. And I feel like I did go back in time, even though I just did it in the pages of a book. But
So thank you again for sharing your story. I appreciate it.
thanks for having me on.
I enjoyed speaking with Amy Wineland Daughters about her book writing experiences, but also her new passion to send personalized handwritten letters to all of her online Facebook friends. Today, Amy knows how impactful those letters are for people receiving them. She knows this because her replies have impacted Amy as well and opened her eyes to the lost art of letter writing. Amy's experience sending notes to her friend Dana while her son was battling cancer started several pen pal relationships. Most of the people Amy wrote to were connected to her in some way over the years. Some were from high school, professional jobs, and even casual acquaintances. However, she did not really know some of the people before writing that first letter. Yet, when they responded, the messages Amy received in return really touched her heart. Amy's mission to send personalized handwritten notes to every one of the 580 people she counted as friends on Facebook was a process that took her 18 months to complete. The experience proved to Amy that absolutely anyone can have purpose in their life by simply speaking words of empathy and encouragement to others. We are awash with junk mail every day. As a result, a handwritten note really stands out. She called the letters an ideal way to reestablish connections that have faded over the years. More importantly, those letters have opened the door to Amy to connect with people who may not share the same political, social, or religious beliefs. However, as humans, we all share a desire for meaningful connection, which is absent in society today. Amy would find something she had in common with each person and focus her message on that. The response was overwhelming because every person has a deep desire to be noticed and valued. A personalized note sends that message loud and clear. Best of all, even people with bad penmanship or arthritis can do the same thing with personalized typed letters inserted into a card and mailed as well. As long as the message comes from the heart, the impact will be tremendous. The letter writing experience has been so profound for Amy that she wrote another book titled Dear Dana, which focuses on her project to send handwritten notes to all of her Facebook friends. People can connect with Amy by visiting www.amydaughters.com. She is also active on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and X. Both of Amy's books, You Cannot Mess This Up and Dear Dana, are available on Amazon, at other bookstores, and on her website. That's all I have for this week's show. If you'd like help in identifying a purpose for your life or to get help planning your next steps, I'm offering a complimentary brainstorming session to members of the Forward from 50 Facebook community. For details, connect with me on Facebook or visit www.forwardfrom50.com. I'll have another inspirational interview on the next episode of the Forward from 50 podcast. Thanks for listening. If you like this show, please consider leaving a review wherever you download the episodes.